Ready for information? Yes. Guys, are you ready for information? Good. Perfect. So first of all, I want to tell you about this new shelter. Before, here was old sarcophagus. Yes, this one. It's till 2010. Yes. So in 2010, the company Novarka and 27 countries started to build this new shelter. Actually, the building was there. You see this territory? Yeah? So they started there and then moved the shelter above the old sarcophagus. Now, inside is old sarcophagus, inside the old sarcophagus, building of the fourth block. Why? Okay, let's go back to the building. It's a building of the block. It was really huge. Huh? Maybe you remember about the control room. By each block are still the control room. Also by the fourth. It didn't destroy. So then, it was a core ignited after the explosion. So, the core consisted of 211 pipes. Inside pipes were these radioactive materials. Around these pipes were graphite. For what reason? So these radioactive materials, actually, they were too fast. So the graphite a little bit slowed down them for producing electricity. I told you that this type of reactor was developed here in 60s in Soviet Union. So only Soviet Union used this type of reactor. And you also watched in our documentary, yes, that Sweden alerted, that it was from here, the accident. But do you know why? You know, yes?
Yeah, well, mostly because of the wind, I mean the cloud that came. But partly, I mean, there was a lot of espionage and intelligence.
Almost.
Okay.
It's also little parts.
All right.
The most important thing that only Soviet Union used these radioactive materials. Xenon, plutonium and cesium. Only here. In other countries, not. Yes, and of course, you're right about espionage, yes, that the other countries knew about this type of reactor, they knew which materials are or were there, so they made a test, with this radiation. Because in Sweden, at those times, on their power plant, they saw that in Sweden it's higher level of radiation, actually. In Belarus, in Minsk, like 400 kilometers away from here, was like 8-9 microsievert per hour in air. You measured in the ground, closer to the ground. But when you stood and measure near the hotspot the air, there's nothing. It's fine. So just imagine in the air, and people breathe all these particles. So the government used this type of reactor, but this reactor have had many mistakes, and it's also the reason why happened this accident. First of all, the main mistake was that when this core is like 700 megawatt of producing, it starts to poison itself, the poisoning. And on 25th of April, one group of engineers started the simulating test. It was a system which must, of course, be against such accidents. It must warn you about this accident which could happen. So they started this test. They switched off the cooling system, but they did this test like 10 hours long. It was too long. They lower the capacity from 3000 megawatt till 700 megawatt. But it was 10 hours, and of course it started poisoning. Here started this poisoning. Then next day came another group, the second group of the engineers. And here we have another mistake. The previous group didn't write what they did with this test. So the next group just came, so okay, we have like 500 megawatt, not 700 megawatt. Strange. Why? Okay, maybe we did this simulating test. Okay. Then the main engineer Dato told them, okay guys, we need 700 megawatts, so please warm up. But they forgot to switch on the cooling system. Poisoning with warming up. Then, of course, the capacity fell lower and lower to 30 megawatt. Only 1% of all producing. And in a couple of seconds, here was like 33,000 megawatts. Yes. And then was the first explosion. So the first explosion destroyed the core. Actually, the core was in the form like a cup. Inside the cup, these were these pipes, and this cup was closed by the protective door. So the door was like 3,000 tons. And the first explosion destroyed the door, and the pieces of the door were around the core, like 50 meters away. Then, in a couple seconds after, was the second explosion, and the second destroyed the building of fourth block. And it means that 190 tons of radioactive dust and rubbish now are around the building of the fourth block. That's why they built the old sarcophagus to cover, and then this one, because old sarcophagus was only for 20 years. And these radioactive particles, they went through all objects, through the metal, through the concrete, and poisoned also the building. That's why old sarcophagus now is the part of the core, actually. So, this one now protect us from the old sarcophagus. It's for 100 years, yes. And it costed like 2 billion euros. 1 billion for the equipment and almost 1 billion for the work. It's 109 meters high, and the wide is 267. And the whole construction is 37,000 tons. Yes. Inside now, of course, they're still working many engineers, workers. The next step must be to dismantle the old sarcophagus, to clean, of course. But we have no options for recycling these parts at all. It means that maybe it will be storage in another place. Then the next step to dismantle and clean the building of the fourth block, and only then they can go inside to the core. But I told you that some radioactive materials are for 24,000 years. So it's not so. Yes. This is destroyed fourth block from above. Actually, it's a mess. Chaos here. And yeah, during the liquidation, of course, here were many helicopters, and they tried to distinguish the fire first of all, and then they used also the liquid metal. For what reason? Because these particles were in the air, so they try to calm them on the ground with the liquid metal. So now on the power plant work about 500 people. They live not here, they live not far away from here in city Slavutich. Slavutich was built right after the explosion, after the catastrophe, for the people, for the workers and their families from here. Now it looks like an old Pripyat, yes. Here on the territory situates also the train station, only one working, and every day these workers go here by the train and go back to home. And for them it's for free. So, do you have questions?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Just one, if I remember from the documentary,
Yes.
in the bus, was that even the pilots in the helicopters became ill when they were
Yes.
working here. Yeah.
Yes, actually there was one accident when pilot couldn't fly right because of the bleeding. Because yes, started bleeding inside the brain. Yes, because of the radiation. Actually, they just were above, near this fourth block, and of course, all these particles they went into the atmosphere. So yes, that's true. And yeah, he died unfortunately. And yeah, you also ask about the propaganda and all other
Yes.
things.
Yeah.
Actually, the government hid some information, very important information about this power plant. Actually, a couple years previous, they did the same test on the second and on the third block, and they had the same mistake and almost the same explosions. Not so big, but the same. And they hid this information. Actually, they falsificated also information about the core. That's why the engineers from the power plant, they thought at first that it was explosion on the water tanks, because at the universities they learned that this type of reactor couldn't explode at all. It's the safest type of reactor in the world. It's about the propaganda, yes, from the Soviet Union. So now, ready for